We can start. So good evening or good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the second day of Stay Engaged online geothermal event. This is our third and last session for today, where we will talk about operations. Operations in terms of main activities and the goals of the National Geothermal Associations. And let me quickly introduce to you three wonderful people that we have here. Thank you everyone for joining. So we have Catherine Hickson, the president of the Geothermal Canada, the Geothermal Association representing Canadian geothermal sector. We have Andrew Sagan, the current president of the Geothermal Resource Council, association representing American geothermal sector, and Oscar Lamosa, director of communication of the AGEOCOL, the Colombian Geothermal Association. So let's maybe do a quick round of introduction and Kathy, ladies first, let's start with you. Could you say where you're joining us from, maybe a few words on your background and how did you end up in geothermal sector, and also a few words about the association Geothermal Canada.
Great. Well, thank you and welcome everybody. It's fun to actually get together and meet some new people and talk about geothermal. I'm located in Burnaby, British Columbia, so we are on the westernmost part of Canada. And my background is actually as a volcanologist. So I started, with a very momentous event, and that was the May 18th eruption of Mount St. Helens. And I was an eyewitness. And that's what got me into volcanology, and volcanology is what got me into geothermal energy. So I have been working in geothermal energy. In 1981, I was doing temperature logging here in British Columbia, and have been associated with geothermal from the beginning. In terms of our association, Geothermal Canada, we just kind of rebranded in 2018. We used to be the Canadian Geothermal Association, and that association began at the second meeting of the GRC. So I think the GRC, the first meeting was 1973, and by 1974, the GRC was up and running, and in 1974, so was the Geothermal Canada. And in fact, we're proud to say that we still have 3 members, and they're still active, retired, but you know, we call on them occasionally to say hi, you know, how are you doing? So we're thrilled, and it's a representation of the fact that even though we don't have power production in Canada, Canadian scientists, Canadian developers have been working around the world in many projects globally. I've had the great good fortune to work in the United States, to work in South America, in Italy, around the Larderello field, in Iceland, New Zealand, Philippines. So it's just a measure of the fact that Canadians have been working in geothermal for a long time, and we hope making contributions to the industry.
Thank you. I think I actually didn't know that. That's a great link to the GRC, and I didn't know that before, that the association, the Geothermal Canada, has rebranded, and actually it has existed for a very long time. So with that nice bridge to Andy, could you introduce yourself and GRC?
Sure, I'm Andy Sagan. I am sitting currently in Colorado Springs, Colorado. My background, I guess, similar to Catherine's. I'm a geologist. I was doing minerals related work. I went back to graduate school after having worked for a few years. And in graduate school, I was studying epithermal gold, among other things. And that project kind of evolved into paleo hydrothermal and then active hydrothermal systems. And then one thing led to the next. And I was offered a job opportunity at a place called the COSO Geothermal Field. And that was really my introduction to geothermal, albeit it was a long time ago. It was in the early 90s. And so I've been working mostly in geothermal. There was a hiatus when I went back into the minerals world for a decade, but mostly in the geothermal world since then. I'm also the president of the Geothermal Resources Council. It's generally a 1 to 2 year appointment. This is my second year. As Catherine said, GRC was founded in the early 70s in Bend, Oregon. Ultimately, it moved to Davis, California, where it's situated now. And we refer ourselves as a California-based nonprofit corporation with a worldwide footprint. So there are some, Margaret, that might take exception to you saying we are the Geothermal Association of the Americas. I mean, granted, the majority of our membership, probably 70%, are from North America, but we do have quite a few members from around the world. At our last annual meeting, I think there were 40 or 38 countries. So, the mission of GRC is probably not unlike Catherine's company. We have an educational mandate, and our objective really is to further the development, the discovery of, and the understanding of geothermal worldwide, but albeit our focus has largely been in the United States.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Sure.
With that, Oscar, could you please introduce yourself and Colombian Geothermal Association?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much to IGA for this invitation to stay engaged in this online geothermal event. So yeah, my name is Oscar Llamosa. I am the communications director. Yeah, I'm supporting the communication of the Colombian Geothermal Association. In Spanish is Asociación Geotérmica Colombiana. So currently I am based in Barcelona, in Spain, in the Western Mediterranean coast. But I grew in the Andes Mountains of Colombia. So I grew there, inspired with these mountains, I started to be a geologist. So I studied geology, and interested in all the subsurface processes. I started to join the oil and gas world. So I worked, once I finished with the university, I worked with 2 major oil companies in Colombia, basically in upstream operations, exploration and production. So all related with logging and things related with the subsurface. So then I started to be interested also in energy transition markets. So I moved to Barcelona, and here I started to be involved with research in some heat flow geothermal gradient projects with several research institutions in Spain, but also in France. So in this trip along the time, I found one day in Denmark in a conference, in the AGA conference, I found the IGA, and I met Marit Brommer during a conference, and she introduced me a little bit about the geothermal world. So once I started to be researching a little bit more about the geothermal, I went back again and to see how the things were moving in Colombia. So I found the Colombian Geothermal Association at the end of 2 years ago, basically. So I just put in touch with them, and I found a really interesting a new association which evolved in 2016 as a student association called ASEC, and it evolved as a Colombian Geothermal Association called AGEOCOL. So it was registered in 2017 in Bogota as a scientific, educational, and professional nonprofit organization, basically established to promote and facilitate all the grouping with the entities related with research, development, and the use of, to promote the use of geothermal resources in Colombia. So basically, in talking about right now in terms of our association, AGEOCOL, Our main mission is to facilitate the synergies between the communities and the government and the academia, but also the industry. And I think right now we are working on that. We are having a lot of international cooperation. We have several members, not only from Colombia, also members from all South America and the Caribbean region. And later on, we are going to talk a little bit more about our operations and activities. So thank you very much again.
Yeah, thank you, Oscar. I think it's great to pick up on that topic. So I think it would be nice to talk about collaboration in the broader region. So today we're talking about the Americas. And Oscar, maybe since we're with you, we've been talking about that before. You have many cool projects, and I know that there's a link between your projects and your activities in the region. You also position yourself as a geothermal hub for Latin America, but also as the GRC, for example, your activities expand. And could you maybe talk about the links that you have, if there are any, to USA and to Canada? Do you collaborate with each other? And if yes, how do you do that?
Yes, so basically the cooperation is related with educational projects. So for example, with Geothermal Canada, we have several links with people like Jasmine and Bastian Pox, which last year, for example, in our annual meeting, we organized short courses here in, in Colombia, in Medellin. So this is the kind of links we have started to develop. For example, with the GRC, also part of our members have been awarded by the GRC in several scholarships and things like this. Also, members of our association have been doing research and doing their masters and PhDs in this kind of collaborations. But at the end, the main collaboration is once all the knowledge, technical, scientific, all this knowledge is established, we can produce the knowledge transfer. So once we create spaces right now, like the webinars or the annual meetings in Colombia, we invite to share this kind of experiences. And I think for Latin America, which have a really great potential in terms of geothermal, these international collaborations are key.
Yeah, I like that you said about the knowledge transfer. And I know that AGEOCOL is a very young association. So it's very nice to have more experienced, let's say, people or external experts on board, such as those from Geothermal Canada or GRC. And with that, to you, Kathy, how do you collaborate within the region? I would really like to see, I don't know, some conference called North American Geothermal Sector, where you together with the GRC will do something, or any ideas to do something like this, because there are for sure some common themes and pillars, and it's all about collaboration. It's all about knowledge sharing and broadening our network, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, as Andy said, I mean, one of the things about the GRC, so the GRC is what got Geothermal Canada going, right at the beginning. It was bringing together, so interested parties from Canada were at that first meeting and decided that they needed to, you know, replicate that. And certainly our mandate is that, you know, we're not an industry lobby group. We are a knowledge exchange group. And our members, we have developers, but we also have the scientists like Yasmin Raymond, who's in Quebec, INRS, an institute there, who's Oscar is collaborating with. So we have a broad spectrum of people in our organization. And one of the things that you know, I kind of throw out there for other organizations is Geothermal Canada has ebbed and flowed over time. And, you know, we were very strong back in the 70s, you know, peaked, another peak in the 80s, another peak in the 90s. And the membership has ebbed and waned with essentially with the price of crude oil. And the price of crude oil is important. You might think why, or wonder why, but obviously in Canada, because of our heating and power generation, a lot is using natural gas. And when there's cheap natural gas around, as well as cheap hydro, which is another renewable, there's not a lot of impetus for, in fact, homegrown geothermal. And that's why in Canada, you know, we have people who are working in geothermal, but they are wide ranging all over the globe. And in terms of joint meetings, you know, we always have a strong presence at the GRC in Reno, and that really is an amazing opportunity to meet people from all over the world, because it, you know, it does draw in people. And, you know, it's very unfortunate the WGC had to be canceled, you know, unfortunate for many reasons, but one is that that's another amazing event for collaboration and just getting to know, networking. To me, the GRC meeting as well as the WGC, these are networking meetings, growing your network, meeting people who are interested in, you know, like our big thing right now are sedimentary basins. So having links to people in Germany is really important, because that's where you are developing your geothermal you know, projects and expertise. So it's about networking.
Totally, absolutely. I agree with that. Andy, Kathy mentioned GRC Expo and meeting, and I think this is one of the biggest events in the region for sure. It also the main corporate event, and also you're representing the let's say one of the oldest associations, the dinosaur, but in a good way. They have been there. I have seen it all. Maybe you could share your view on collaboration within the region, and also maybe it will be very beneficial for Oscar representing the new and young association. If you could share your experience in terms of leading. I know you have been just 2 years the president of the GRC, but you have been on the board for quite some time. So maybe you can share your experience in this regard.
Sure, and I agree with Catherine and Oscar that collaboration really is one of the, and I'll try to answer your question, but I'm going to digress. One of the issues that we've observed for many years now, certainly in the United States, is in the last, say, 5 or 6 years, there's been a concerted effort to develop renewables in the United States and worldwide. But I live in the United States, so I know more about the United States than, say, Germany. And solar and wind have eaten the lunch of geothermal in the minds of most people. And why is that? Well, there's a number of reasons, and a lot of people, including probably everyone on this call, have discussed it and scratched their head about how can the profile of geothermal be elevated. And one of many conclusions is that geothermal, at least in the United States, the huge push in the United States in the late 70s and early 80s, first was established in 1961, but the big push was in the late 70s and early 80s associated with American legislation called PURPA, which kind of opened the door for these independent power producers. And there was a big interest in renewables because of oil embargoes by Saudi Arabia, et cetera. So that kind of kickstarted the geothermal industry, and it was the oil and gas people initially that were at the forefront of this. And oil and gas tends to be very, well, they have all the money in the world, they hire the best and the brightest, and they're very purposefully somewhat secretive. And the geothermal industry seems to operate, or has operated, in silos. Company A doesn't talk with company B doesn't talk with company C, et cetera. And so there's that phenomenon taking place where an effort to collaborate would open some of the doors unloosens data and possibly unveil the mystery of geothermal to decision makers. So we are definitely supportive of collaboration of any stripe. We at the Geothermal Resources Council have been in the process of a major transition that started about 3 years ago, and it's been somewhat organic. Yes, I've been on the board for a long time, and many board members, and this is my last year, by the way, and many board members sort of had a vision for where we needed to be. But we've been slowly transitioning to, among other places, to be much more open, much more accessible, much more relevant, with an overt attempt to be much more collaborative. You know, we'll see where that gets us, but I'm kind of losing my train of that I wanted to make is, I had said that we have an educational mandate. Part of that transition a few years ago is we consolidated with the lobbying group called the Geothermal Energy Association. So we actually component to us. Pursuant to American law, we were allowed to consolidate with the GEA, which is now called a special committee within the policy committee within the Geothermal Resources Council. And we did that for basically for cost-cutting purposes, but we also feel that it gives us much broader range of skills and much broader relationships, because at the end of the day, it's those relationships that can build these collaborations and can move the needle. Sorry to be speaking in cliches, but sometimes they're appropriate. Most of the times they're not, but.
No, I think they're totally appropriate, and I'm on your side, and I liked what you said about the collaboration. And in this regard, well, the world faces right now a very unprecedented situation, the global health crisis, and in some way or another, it has affected all of us. And Andy, let's stay with you for a second. You've mentioned the transition that GRC has been going through. Could you maybe elaborate more on that? And also, how are you getting on with considering all this crazy thing that's happening out there? How do you communicate with your members? I know you're very active. I read your newsletter every other week. How are you getting on?
Well, we do this. we have a lot of Zoom meetings. We have a lot of go-to meetings. We have obviously all of us who are continuing to work in our 9-to-5 jobs. This is what we're doing. One of the transitions that we went through, and it was very difficult for a lot of reasons, is we hired an association management company to assist us with the day-to-day operations. We had a staff of quite a few dedicated for many, many years. Most of them are no longer with us, which was very difficult for us. It was very difficult for them. But for cost-cutting purposes and for a lot of reasons, we felt we had to make that transition. As it turned out, we assumed that the big push this year, especially with our #1 money-making, revenue-generating enterprise, which is our annual meeting, just like WGC is is certainly valuable for IGA. We've assumed that our focus would be resolving this transition and working out the kinks, and it is, but it's been overprinted by COVID-19, which has impacted everyone on the planet. Our plans as of right now, and we started working on these plans in March, we're going down the meeting scheduled for October in Reno is concerned, where we are going to put on an annual meeting with a virtual component, but we reserve the right to have this be an entirely virtual meeting if necessary. We'd prefer not to, because as Catherine said, at annual meetings like this, meetings in Canada, meetings in Germany, meetings in Colombia, meetings all around the world, you go ostensibly to attend the technical sessions, but really a lot of business takes place in the hallways, over coffee breaks, at dinner. so that that camaraderie and those opportunities to interact one-on-one would be a huge loss if we can't do that. However, we feel that there's a tremendous value to the annual meeting as well. So this association management company that we hired, as it turns out, has a lot of skills on a virtual meeting. So we sort of, we made this transition, and it looks like it may work out to our benefit, because we certainly did not have the skill sets to put on a virtual meeting like we're planning. But you know, the proof is in the pudding. We'll see. We'll talk to all of you after October and see if we pulled it off, if the meeting was valuable, and etc.
I hope it will take place. I agree. The live meetings, personal meetings, and doing business over the coffee breaks, totally true.
Right.
So Kathy, maybe let's go back to you. Could you tell us how are you dealing with the current situation? Are you as agile and as adaptive as the GRC?
Well, I would say yes, and we've had to be adaptive over the decades. And one of the ways that we've been adaptive is you know, we are basically an all-volunteer organization. So that has a huge impact in basically keeping the association together. The association is an association of individuals. Our membership price is low. It basically pays for a web page, it pays for some support, things like that, but we have no paid staff. So that allows us to be agile when the market has turned down significantly. And right now, so one of the things that I want to just sort of pick up on what Andy said in terms of, you know, how do you get geothermal onto the front pages? So I already mentioned in Canada, I mean, our biggest struggle has been cheap natural gas as well as lots and lots of hydro. So already a significant proportion of many provinces, British Columbia, Quebec, Ontario, for example, have a significant renewable base. So it was very hard for geothermal to basically break into that. And our association, as well as just basically geothermal in Canada, ebbed and flowed with the price of crude oil. I've already said that. So I've been around geothermal since 1981. What I have seen literally in the last year to, you know, even 6 months is an incredible step change on the part of the Canadian government as well as provincial governments. And this step change has been brought about directly because of geothermal's ability to be base load, renewable, but to help reduce greenhouse gases. So you know, even though the price of crude oil has cratered, and what we should see is, you know, between COVID-19 and cratering of the price of crude oil, I mean, there should be no geothermal in Canada. And yet we are actually ramping up. We have a power project in Saskatchewan. We have another power project going ahead in Alberta. We have an incredible interest in geothermal, but it is being driven by the greenhouse gas potential reductions. So a totally different perspective than what we saw 2 years ago even. So in Canada, we're actually ramping up in geothermal. And of course, these projects are the drilling project in Saskatchewan. Fortunately, they stopped drilling just before the, you know, kind of the peak of the shutdown was happening. So that didn't affect their drilling program at all. They're now, you know, busily looking at their data. So that had no impact on our Alberta #1 project. That's basically still in the desktop study. So COVID-19 has not had an impact on that at all. So we have few projects, but you know, we're 200% better than we were 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So we are moving ahead, and it's really because of a change in perception about what geothermal can do to actually help reduce greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
Hey, Margaret, can I pick up on a point that Catherine made, because it's really relevant. We've seen the exact same thing. The last big boom in geothermal, certainly in North America, was between roughly, I'd say, 2004 and 2009. And the argument was that the price of oil was $130+ a barrel. And so with the price of the brown power competition to renewables being so high, that opened the door for renewables, similarly to legislation that was late 70s called PURPO, which opened the door for geothermal, and that was driven by oil and gas embargoes. What we're finding today is there's a huge interest in renewables, and especially geothermal. The Department of Energy had the Department of Energy's Geothermal Technologies Office has the biggest budget that they've ever had. Oil and gas, because of the depressed market, seems to slowly be making inroads into the geothermal industry. And it's just the opposite. The price of oil is real low, and yet there seems to be a resurgence. And I think the point that Catherine made is critical. Current world leaders notwithstanding, most of the world appreciates and understands climate change and understands the value of being carbon neutral. And the world is going there, whether some of these leaders are going to go there or not. And that's very exciting, and it's a very positive step for our.
I think I lost you for a second.
Did you lose me? Oh no, all these wonderful words.
A little bit, but maybe it was just me. But I do.
No, Andy, we heard your culminating sentence, and that was wonderful, and I agree.
It's everything else.
we heard the main point, and I do agree with that. But isn't it true? I mean, in situations like such, where it is very unstable, with unstable markets, and basically with everything that's going on, it's important to see the opportunity, and it's important to see the possibility for growth. And it is my strong belief that we can see it everywhere if we look hard enough. So, and it also, your example of your associations, Geothermal Canada and Jersey, it's a time to reflect on where we are, however strange it might seem, but that's true. Where we are, where do we stand? How can we adapt to a new situation? How can we become better and see the opportunities where others can see, well, let's say, losses? And I think you've been doing it from what I hear, you've been handling it just great, just amazing. It's amazing to hear that you see and find good points in this unstable situation. Oscar, let's hear your side. How is it going in the South American region? What's going on? How are you adapting?
Yeah, so first of all, compared with the GRC and Geothermal Canada, we are pretty new. So we are, I have to put a remark here, that we are a really good team of committed people with the association, a committed team of volunteers. So basically, we provide our efforts right now to build the association. So since our operational costs right now for the general management are not really high, we also try to keep it low, and in situations like this right now. So one of the things, or one of our strategies, is to optimize our connections. And once again, it's a topic of collaboration. So in a particular case, for example, for the web design, web development, which is right nowadays a really important tool to communicate, well, we optimize like our connection. So in this case, for example, we knocked the door to IGA, which we are member of the IGA. It was before the COVID. It was yeah, at the beginning of the last year, in 2019. So we knocked the door of the IGA, and Marit and all the team support us from the technical part. So with our skills, we create this new website with a membership management system integrated, with a automatic payment integrated, but with our tools. So in this case, an important thing is to optimize this kind of connection. So we didn't know that at the beginning of this year it was happen something like this. So it was done in the right moment. We launched the new website at the beginning of this year with all integrated, everything working well, and happened the COVID. So it was a great opportunity to use it, because we started to develop, again, to optimize our connections, to develop webinars. So we started to connect with people with our connections with the Sagan in Chile, which have a lot of experiences in geothermal direct uses, and also in deep geothermal, with people from Sweden, with people from Canada. So at the day, we already did 13 webinars week by week during this lockdown with a global projection. So I think that's one of the things that I think we are doing. It's optimizing resources in this moment, like digital resources.
Yeah, I know you rock the online sphere, and you have a lot of webinars, and you have a lot of sessions also online. Are they in Spanish language, by the way?
Yes. So I would say 80% of our webinars, as well as our web, is in Spanish. So this is a good opportunity for all Spanish speaker countries, not only for Latin America, also for Spain, and all the world. There are people around the world, maybe living in other countries, who are Spanish speakers. So maybe they are living in countries where geothermal is already not developed or developed, but they want to see how the things are moving in the Latin American region. Maybe they have experiences in other countries, and they can provide their expertise in the Latin American region. So one of our targets or what our purposes with this website is to make a website in Spanish. So Colombia is located in a region with the Andes meets the Caribbean and the great waters of the Pacific. So it's a really geographically and geologically well located point on Earth. So it's strategically located to all the South American countries, but also with the North and Central American countries, but also Europe. So we are like in the middle, and also this web was one of the purpose, to be like in the middle, to connect people and to connect expertise and to connect experiences and then share. And that's the things we are doing with the webinars.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm keeping an eye on time, and I think it's the time for questions. So guys, everyone who's here with us today, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I would like to thank every one of our speakers today. Thank you so much for taking the time. For me, the time has flown. It has been a pleasure. I have already one question. I guess, Katie, that's to you. Will Geothermal Canadian Summit still take place? Geothermal Canadian.
Good question. Yeah, so the University of Alberta has a very strong team working on geothermal from various aspects, not just the subsurface, but also the engineering aspect. And they had tried to host the first summit. It got canceled for various reasons. Unfortunately, the second summit is slated and for September. Looks like, well, we know it will be canceled. We're in discussions with the U of A team as to picking a new date, but it's just not clear. I mean, as with everybody who's planning face-to-face meetings, they're either going to have to go virtual or they're going to be delayed. So it's, you know, stay tuned, I guess, is the only thing I can say.
Yeah. I guess it would be the same with GRC meeting in Expo, right, Andrew? I know you mentioned that you're prepared to do a part or the whole event if the situation would be such to do it virtual. I do hope that both of the events will happen and take place. But Andy, what would be the deadline, let's say, for you to know that the GRC will or will not take place? I mean, it
Well,
will take place, but virtually.
yeah, at this point, the plans are that there will be a meeting. In fact, all of us have have become virus experts, and we've read about the 1918 pandemic, et cetera. And barring some catastrophe, the meeting's going to take place. It's just, is it going to be in place with a virtual component or entirely virtual? And we haven't yet resolved that drop dead date. We are in negotiations with the Peppermill Hotel, where waited this year. We've worked with the Peppermill for many, many years. It's a great venue for our purposes. We work well with them. So we are negotiating right now on exactly, you know, rates and rentals, et cetera. And hopefully we'll know for certain within, well, certainly by the summer. I would like to say within a month, but I'd just be making that up if I said that. So we're definitely going to host the meeting. It's just, will it be in person or will it be entirely virtual, or both? More than likely, we're hoping that it's going to be in person with a virtual component.
Yeah, I do hope so as well. Fingers crossed that it will happen. Another question, I guess, Kathy and Andy, to you both, because Kathy, you were mentioning the oil and gas sector a lot. We have a question from Javier, who would like to ask if if you have had any positive experiences while querying any oil and gas operator about the possibility to push the boundaries of standard business towards the geothermal.
Yes. So my project, Alberta #1, is in the heart of oil country. And we are working not exactly on a daily basis, but we have to be in touch with the operators in that area. Alberta does not currently have a regulatory framework for geothermal. So we need to work hand in hand with operators as well as service providers. One of the things that has just happened, like literally a couple of weeks ago, is so the associations like the Drillers Association and the oil field associations, Geothermal Canada and Clean Energy Canada have just come together to form a collaboration, and that collaboration is to build on the skill sets and the ideals of each of the organizations. So we just actually announced that a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of in a formative stage, but really what it is it's a collaboration. And because the oil industry in Canada has been so badly hit, if we look 2 years ago, there were literally hundreds of wells hundreds of rigs drilling wells. There's only 22 drilling right now. And just to give you an idea, there's over 500,000 wells that have been drilled in Alberta alone. So they have extended their hand in friendship, and you know, we've accepted it, and we will be working collaboratively together. So it's great. And obviously the geothermal industry has always borrowed from the oil and gas industry. And so this is not a new collaboration. This is just made more important because of the current situation from an economic standpoint.
Yes, thank you. We're staying in the oil and gas sphere. Andy, there is a question from Bo, a geoscientist working for an oil and gas company. They've been recently looking at the geothermal across the US. Could you recommend and send any information or say where to find an information, publications, maybe that give full economics about exploration to get into the plant? Is there any information about the economics online? Would you across
The economics of geothermal? You're referring to the economics of geothermal, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work by, I'm not sure exactly what linkages are available to some of that work through the GRC website, because that is also in transition. However, there has been quite a bit of work in the last couple of years. It's primarily been driven by the incorrect perception that geothermal, while a renewable just like wind and solar, is much more expensive, and that's really not accurate when you look at all of the costs. Work by consulting groups and by the government on trying to explain what the exact costs are of geothermal as opposed to, say, solar and wind, and as opposed to brown power. Off the top of my head, I can think of papers that have those data, but I don't know where one could find them other than, say, me or through Geothermal Resources Council. Does that answer the question, or was there another part to it?
Yeah, I guess it does. Maybe we can also recommend to go to the GRC website in the library. They have a very extensive library, so go to the GRC website and look for the information there. That might help. Or write Andy an email.
Just, yeah, contact me directly, yeah, and I will put them in touch with it if they can't find it through the website.
Great, thank you. We have a question for Oscar. So you were mentioning the webinars in Spanish. Could you elaborate more on the value to do more of the webinars and maybe meeting sessions in Spanish? How do you find the Spanish? Is Spanish language important for your members, and well, for your members of course, but within the region? Do you see the value? Where do you see this value of introducing more webinars and more workshops in Spanish? Also maybe in Europe, because there are a lot of Spanish speaking people in Europe.
Yeah. Definitely, it's 100% important. I will say, like, one of the big challenges we face in Latin America is education, basically. So there's a lot of people that are, yeah, facing with this challenge, and the governments and all this thing. And at the end of the agenda of the education is the English lessons. So the people in Latin America, we are not so proficient in English language. So if we want to communicate to new generations or people who are ending right now the university and are interested in energy transition markets, which are really an important issue right now worldwide, and also in Colombia, for example. Just like, to give an example, several weeks ago, the World Economic Forum just sent a report which showed that Colombia scaled from the stage 34 to the 25 stage. So it scaled 9 positions in improvements in energy transition. So there are good things in terms of energy transition markets in Latin America. There are countries like Costa Rica, like Uruguay, like Peru, like Ecuador, Mexico. Well, all the countries in Latin America which are focused on energy transition markets, but also, as you mentioned, in Europe. For example, Spain are interested in right now in develop geothermal direct use applications for heating and cooling districts, but also they are exploring in some areas, for example, here in Catalonia, to explore possibilities to deep geothermal. So there is a huge amount of people who are interested in. I cannot give exactly the number, but we see that, for example, during our webinars, we reach at least 300 or 400 people in these 13 sessions. So I think there is a good opportunity to expand the language as a vehicle of communication.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. I say let's take the last question, and this is to our wonderful lady Kathy. Is direct use of geothermal, for example, for green tech, greenhouses, is it important in Canada, the direct use sector?
Well, that's a great question to end on, because the answer is no at the moment, but it is what we want to do to change the rhetoric in Canada. We actually want to change it from focus on power production to direct use, greenhouses, grain drying, forestry products, space heating. Canada is a cold country, and in fact, that's where geothermal can really make a huge impact, is on those kinds of aspects. So yes, we hope to have more greenhouses heated by geothermal energy to increase our food security and just change the rhetoric in Canada. We don't have all the volcanoes that you have down in Colombia, and these, we have a few, but basically our resource is a low temperature resource, and we need to really push those low temperature applications.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. I guess that's the time to sort of stop right here. And I would like to thank you, everyone, Andy, Kathy, Oscar. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time. And thanks to participants for joining us on our second day and our last session. We hope to see you tomorrow. We have some other exciting sessions. One of them is from China. We're going to have representatives from China talking about the WGC 2023. So we hope to see you there. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Margaret.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Andrew. Bye, Catherine.
Bye-bye. I'll send you that MOU, Oscar.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Looking forward.
Bye-bye.